to episode 52 of the Hard Truth About B2B e-commerce. I'm your co-host, Isaiah, and I'm here with Tim.
Hey, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for showing up for episode 52. We're deep into our second 50, I guess. We'll call it that. I'm Timothy Peterson. Great to see you all. Let me give you a couple shout outs to our sponsors. I want to give a big thank you to them. The first and original is Punch Out To Go. They're a global B2B integration company specializing in connecting commerce business platforms with e-procurement and ERP applications. And Punch Out To Go's iPaaS technology seamlessly links business applications to automate the flow of purchasing data. With their solution, you can immediately reduce integration complexities for Punch Out catalogs, electronic purchase orders, invoices, and other B2B sales order automation documents to accelerate business results. Thank you to Punch Out To Go. And our second sponsor is Balance. Balance is a B2B e-commerce payment solution that works well for you and for your buyers. It offers a seamless one-click checkout for almost any payment method, including ACH, wire, checks, cards, even terms. It's used by leaders in B2B e-commerce, and it's as easy as buying a shirt from Amazon. Check them out at getbalance.com. Book a session, tell them what your needs are. And they are the first dedicated payment platform for B2B e-commerce, 100% tailored to your needs. Thanks again to both of our sponsors. And I am very excited about our guests today. Ian, Leslie, Isaiah, you can take it from here.
Yeah, no, this is exciting. Ian, I've seen you on social media for a while now, talking about all sorts of stuff about e-commerce, and it's usually gets me thinking, and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And finally got connected to you, and I was like, I'd love to have you on the podcast. Wasn't really sure how much, B2B stuff you've done, but it was interesting because the more we talked, I was like, wow, you guys are really, and I'm talking more about Industry West. I know you're now at Bolt, but at Industry West, it sounds like you guys were kind of a nice mix of B2B and B2C online, which is fairly unique. So tell us about, your background. I think obviously that wasn't your first job too. So how did you get into this?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, appreciate you guys having me. So I was out of school. I was a journalist, which I think a lot of us in marketing started with some sort of writing journalism background or something like that, just kind of inquisitive, and was taught how to just kind of think contextually and creatively and strategically. So was in journalism for a while, and then sort of kind of got into jack of all social media marketing and marketing in general. Pivoted that into doing social media for higher ed, a university down here in the South. Ultimately ended up leading all outbound lead gen for higher ed for that university, Savannah College of Art and Design. It was leading their website team, email marketing, social media, SEM, SEO, trying to get high school students to raise their hand and say they were interested in attending, and took that demand gen, lead gen kind of tactics that I learned and took it over to Industry West and started kind of pivoting that into e-commerce. And and now I'm at Bolt, which is another one-click checkout solution that works across multiple platforms, and multiple platforms that also work within for B2B as well. Works for Magento, BigCommerce, all that sort of thing. A lot of
my BigCommerce shirt on right now.
So. Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
I noticed that. So
they're so comfy. I keep wearing.
Yeah.
They're smart.
But yeah, I mean, I think I'm sure we'll talk about. I mean, BigCommerce is making a lot of moves into the B2B space and doing a lot of cool stuff to make that a bit more modular. So so that's where I'm at right now. And
I love when a platform takes your advice. I talked to BigCommerce a while back, and then it was on like one of their partner kind of advice, talks, and they were talking about the B2B stuff and the B2B module, or kind of the bundle that they wrapped in. And I was like, yes, you need that. They were like, do you think we need this? I was like, yes,
yeah,
we need it.
Sure.
Like,
yeah. And I know, it's getting a lot of, that release is getting a lot of a lot of attention, rightfully so.
Yeah.
So could you do me a favor and give me, for our listeners, give like a sense of Bolt and their place in the payment solution universe? Like really tell us a little bit more about Bolt specifically for our listeners.
Yeah, I think that's a great, yeah, I'd love to. That's a good question, obviously. I mean, I think Bolt is much more than a gateway. It's truly a checkout operating system. So first of all, for the merchant, you have this amazing one-click checkout functionality. It's aesthetically amazing and beautiful, in my opinion. Within that, you are able to, within your administrative backend on Bolt, you're able to incorporate all of the alternate payment methods or buy now, pay later methods that you want. If you want to add Apple Pay to your checkout process, go ahead, log into your Bolt account and throw in your Apple Pay credentials. Same thing with Amazon Pay, PayPal, Affirm, etc. Mm-hmm. So really, it's trying to create a checkout operating system where you are able to do all that and then also reap the benefits of a lot of great value-add analytics on the back end to see how your customers are checking out, how they're interacting with the checkout experience, where they're dropping, etc. Then you also have the fraud protection that it offers. Bolt does an amazing job with its fraud work and indemnifying merchants. Merchants are indemnified against any fraudulent charges that Bolt allows through the system, which is great. And then obviously you have the network effects. So I mean, one-click checkout is a big talking point right now across e-commerce. So if you check out on, say, one of Forever 21, create a Bolt account, opt in to create a Bolt account and save your information. You can then go to any other Bolt merchant. And when you begin the checkout process, you're pinged for, your email address or your cell phone number, and you get that code and you just breeze right through.
That PayPal kind of effect, they're kind of the original network payment gateway effect, right?
Sure. Yeah, and I think where Bolt kind of has the value add also in that network effect is we also offer SSO, so single sign-on. So if you with those same credentials, you log on to Forever 21, you see where your orders are, your order history. You log on to Industry West, which happens to be a Bolt merchant, and you see your order history in Industry West. You see where your order stands. So it's more than, I think it's a little bit more than PayPal, but yeah, certainly. But
I just meant that they were the original
sure.
Guys.
Yeah.
I didn't want to discount what you guys are doing, but yeah, so you guys are more of a holistic solution, not just we're just a gateway, right?
Yeah, and works across Magento, works across BigCommerce, WooCommerce, a lot of great headless implementation, Salesforce. So I mean, really, and some great merchants coming online that are bolstering the network effect. More and more consumers using it and growing.
So I just have a quick question before we jump too deep into the B2B stuff, but I think it's kind of a valuable lesson for people in general, because what's really interesting about your background is you're kind of just like a marketing guy, right? You're like, I do outbound, I do social media. And then all of a sudden you're like deep in the weeds in Magento too, and like Bolt. And so tell us about like that transition and how it, like, if you were to give advice to, let's say, a B2B merchant and their marketing people, how important do you think it is for them to actually understand what's going on? Because I feel like sometimes there's this big gap between marketing and that's where things go wrong, right? Because they're like, oh, just make it easy, like just make it work. It's like, well, it's not that simple, right?
I think that's a great question. I think a lot of it is dependent on the size of the company. I mean, I had this conversation with Phil Jackson on Future Commerce, which I'm sure you guys are familiar with Phil. Like, is that, the toolkit of the modern day CMO, and like being where I was at Industry West, which was, still considered SMB, though a very good size SMB, but it's still a startup, bootstrap startup. I mean, your CMO is also kind of your IT director, is also, your e-commerce director is also, your events director. But I mean, I think, it's really important for your CMO to have a full stack understanding of the tech side on the e-commerce side, but then really an understanding of how the order funnels through all the way from front end on the e-com side all the way to your ERP and then through fulfillment. And then similarly, like how is your inventory and your data coming back from the ERP and funneling back up to the website, and trying to create at the end of the day, I mean, you want, regardless of how much money you have, whether you have $500 million to spend, or if you're, bootstrapping and you have, 500,000 to spend, like you want to create efficiencies for your team and your staff and save money where you can. But also like create a tech stack that works well for the company, works well for the people, so that they're able to have fun, enjoy what they're doing, and make the most out of what the company's trying to achieve.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, I agree with that so much. And I think obviously larger companies have the advantage of economy of scale, and
sure,
have a CMO and a CTO and a CIO and like all these things. But most of what we think our listeners are probably going to be people, small to mid-sized companies. There's a majority of companies out there, right? So they don't have
Yeah. It's what powers, definitely powers the country is the SMB side.
Yeah. And just one other observation on that. In a lot of my conversations, I think what's happened, especially the last 5 to 10 years, is that almost any role that might have had more of the soft skill side has moved more toward the hard skill side. So marketers, maybe a decade or so ago or more, a lot of them were sort of living on legacy ideas and systems and what have you. It's just not the case anymore. You can't really be a successful marketer without having a very good understanding of a lot of the tech, platforms and opportunities, the tools, the different things you can work with. So very different.
I think, that's really the narrative, particularly on social. And I mean, Isaiah, I know you follow web. I mean, are you a polymath? Are you a generalist? Are you whatever it is? But like, we all have to have our fingers.
I haven't got that far into that. I don't know what I call myself.
But yeah, I've really for quite a long time before, even I was active on Twitter, I've really liked to have said like I was, jack of all, master of none. Hopefully I've mastered, or I don't think I'll ever master anything, but definitely have become expert in some things over the years. But I think you have to really just have a general knowledge, and it just makes your life easier in working with your colleagues as well.
Yeah, you appreciate the developers a lot more once you realize.
Oh, for sure. Yeah,
that's true. Yeah.
And I think that's a big gap in B2B, right? So let's get into some of the stuff around B2B. I mean, tell us about, I think just straight up, I think it's always good to hear the story of like, just this is what happened and this is what worked for us. Obviously it could be.
Yeah. So
how did you guys get into B2B e-commerce? Because you were doing online sales that were B2B, it's not just consumer sales, right? So
so I mean, again, not in industry West anymore, but happy to tell their story, and they're still dear friends of mine. Is Jordan, really had a thought of like, I love this furniture. I think other people are going to love this furniture. I think this furniture is beautiful, and I can get it at a price point that is not a Restoration Hardware level, but not, IKEA level, and kind of be in that mid range. And I think what he was seeing was at that price point, people weren't stocking, and it was always like, call us, get a quote, and like, and if someone wanted 20 chairs, right, exactly, right, like call for a quote, email for a quote. If you wanted 20 bar stools for your pizzeria, like you weren't going to be able to buy it online.
Wow.
And that's,
and what was the lead time? What was what would be a lead? Let's say I want 20 stools. What's a lead time for that back in the day? Let's say pre-industry West.
Pre-industry West. I mean, I really don't know. Yeah. I mean, let's say, I mean, I don't know. Like, I mean, furniture's so crazy, right? Because like, I remember when I was a kid going furniture shopping with my parents for like a new dining room set, right? And you walk through the showroom and then like you got it in your house 6 months later. I mean, like it's really crazy how lead times just over the years with furniture and just how the ebbs and flows of furniture as an industry. But okay, let's just forget about the lead time. Like, let's just say the sales process. I mean, like, right, you're probably looking at like a week minimum of closing that sale, like emailing, calling, right, exactly, just to get the sale. So Jordan was like, that's crazy. Like, there are all these restaurants, all these coffee shops, like they just want a bistro stool, right? Like they just want 20 bistro chairs for their coffee shop. Like, why can't I sell it to them?
Or more desks at Trellis. We went through a little.
Yeah, exactly. So he started with a low SKU count and but stocked and put those on, and then and really just like in a very bootstrapped entrepreneurial fashion was like just kind of hit the ground and ramp. And a buddy of mine actually built Jordan's first Drupal site with 15 SKUs or something, and word of mouth was great. And the fact that he had inventory, people were talking. Jordan, and also, I mean, I do think not to diminish the fact that Jordan has and have an amazing curatorial eye. Like I do think that ultimately was their secret sauce for the furniture space. But yeah, he had inventory. He was allowing people to just buy the dang furniture, which like so there were so many like in the early. Well, this was now they're 10 years old now, so like we're talking 2010, 2011. I mean, furniture as a vertical, like there were more sites putting up roadblocks to actually purchase than there were that were actually allowing you to purchase.
Yeah.
So
even on B2C, right? Like even that was like hard to get. It was like
for sure.
Mm-hmm. It was a Wayfair. Was like, yeah.
Right. So I mean, I think that's really like so it wasn't the intent. I think he just sort of happened into the B2B side, and he's like, oh, okay, this works. Well, I'm going to stock a lot of this chair or a lot of this stool in this color, and like BurgerFi loves it or Burger King loves it. And then he started getting these kind of contract deals or these deals with different chains, and it just sort of took off from there. That was actually like it was B2B first behind like the guise of a e-commerce like cool tech company.
Interesting.
I
didn't realize that. I always see
a lot of the way
when you go to the site.
Right, exactly. A lot of like the bells and whistles that you would assume come with like a consumer side company of like, hey, give us your email address for 10% off, and like a lot of great like kind of drip campaigns via email or whatever. Like that came down the road. It was really first and foremost like we see need for this stool. We see like that there's demand within coffee shops, pizzerias, mom and pop burger joints throughout the country that want the red bistro chair that you see everywhere.
And they want it fast.
And they want it fast.
Yeah.
So I mean, and again, and Jordan, like through his own grit and determination, I mean, like he tells the story, and I've told the story when I was with them, is that like, I mean, he had someone who needed like was opening a burger joint in Pittsburgh and needed the stools like, in 10 days. And Jordan like got the stools out of the container himself, put them in a U-Haul, and like drove up to Pittsburgh from Jacksonville, Florida. I mean, and that's awesome, man. And that's
what was
like
the delivery fee for that?
Yeah, I don't know, man. Probably a couple of burgers. Yeah.
What's kind of interesting to me, just as an observation. So I was once, I did furniture for a while, so listeners may not know that, but I did furniture for a bit. I was even store director for a furniture chain at one point, a long time ago, right? But I worked for the Williams-Sonoma companies and Pottery Barn in the early internet era, and they had all kinds of weirdness going on. And so they had, a corporate B2B side, an entire division. But usually what they would do is they would, the warehouses were divided up so that there was a retail warehouse, and then there for consumer, and then there was the catalog / e-commerce warehouse system, for B2B. And you really couldn't go between the two. You had to just go to one. And so if the stock was not, in your catalog, e-commerce place, which is where B2B ended up, you couldn't go over to retail and pull it out of there. So it was really a very like weird system that needed to change, and it has. But
yeah, I mean, that's super interesting. And I think that kind of talks to I think this can kind of pivot us into like that conversation of B2B and e-com and how we manage how these companies are managing inventory and managing data. Because like when I was there, one of the things I was really proud of is how we built multiple sites across one Magento installation. And so we were actually powering like 5 sites off of, or right now, ultimately they'll be powering 5 sites off of a single Magento instance. One for Industry West, one for Industry West like B2B portal, commercial sales portal, another for a sister site that was more accessory focused, another for a warehouse sales site, and then another for a Canadian subdomain.
Yep.
So all and to your point, all the data and all the inventory and all lives in the one instance, and then you decide which site you want to push it to. And then similarly, all the sales are coming back into the same Magento instance and then porting back into the same ERP. So it's definitely
kind of. What are you guys using? Just curious.
They were using NetSuite.
Okay, cool.
Sure.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty solid stack. We have a furniture customer with NetSuite. We just got them on a Magento too, and it seems like a good stack for, because furniture is so complex. Like
Sure.
you can't you can use Shopify, but like you're gonna outgrow it.
Yeah, I think that's often the conversation is why, why Magento, or why more of an enterprise solution for furniture. And yeah, I mean, when you're starting to talk the level of configurations and kits and grouped products, and then dealing with
Fabric,
so many shipping and tax issues,
yeah, shipping is
that and then as you go into duties across, it's just, yeah, I think there does become a level of complexity where with furniture, I think more times than not, you're going to be seeing a more enterprise level back end.
Yeah, you need unique things, right? Like it's hard to have like an out of the box kind of solution with
Sure.
with furniture. But
Yeah.
what was the biggest like kind of surprise that you saw with B2B e-commerce? Like going from education, all of a sudden you're like selling POs to like Burger King.
Yeah.
Like, was there anything that you were like, wow, like why is this way? Like why can't we change this? Or I mean, obviously you guys saw that early on where you're like, why can't we just sell to businesses online? But what came of that was like surprising to you? I'm sure something came up.
Yeah. So I mean, I think I guess it's twofold. Is one is like on both ends of the spectrum, is that I found that B2B buyers were very much like consumer side buyers. And I don't know if this was unique to furniture as a vertical, because like we weren't selling copy paper. We weren't selling like, more our B2B product was also B2C functional. So, and also because we weren't selling traditional like Herman Miller kind of office furniture. It was furniture you could use in your home or office.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think like
it was
right, exactly. So for me, it was like we didn't have to talk to the B2B customer that much differently. I found that the B2B customer didn't need all the information on the site. If they liked the product, they would ask the questions like, okay, I like this chair. Now that I know I like the chair for the use case, I'm going to ask you, do you have 200 of them? If not, when can I get them? What's the what's the certification? Is it fire retardant, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Okay, I'm good to go. Mm-hmm. So I think like the fact that you could talk to them like a consumer side buyer was eye-opening to me. The other piece that I always found surprising and interesting was that furniture, again, is a bit of an old school vertical. And no matter how much you do to try and make it as turnkey as possible for the B2B client, there are some that are just never going to check out online. So like I would routinely see people build a cart, like say a $20,000 cart online, get like their trade discount, which is the same discount they're going to get if they call a rep. They get it online, take a screenshot of the cart, and then email that to the rep to get like the same exact quote. But like they just wanted to go that way,
right? Like they just probably are like, can I place this $20,000 order? Like what's going to happen, right? And they feel better about sending an email with that exact same information and someone looking it over.
Right.
And maybe that's a thing that could be solved by like, hey, look, place the order. It's not officially processed until we review it and email you and say it's good, or there could be some sort of, you know what I mean?
Well, and I'll interject on this one too, because I think this has come up in multiple conversations where it is partly that where the B2B consumer is looking at this and thinking, well, what happens next? Like, will I be able to do terms, like payment terms or whatever, that could go back to what Bolt is about, right? It's like, what happens if I do it, as an
e-commerce, or freight shipping, or they're scared that the shipping is not going to be accurate, or it's going to
exactly. So it's
shipped, or they're scared to place the order because they don't really know exactly what's going to happen.
Sure. Yeah. So, but that being said, I mean, we were able to make great strides where ultimately, like, we would see, I think AOV wasn't it when it came to B2B, it wasn't so much tracking AOV as much as it was a lift in AOV as much as it was units per order. And we definitely saw that increase over the years where we would routinely, like daily, see online orders for 20 chairs, 30 chairs. Like you just began to know. You didn't even have to see who the customer was. Like, oh, that's a B2B order. You know, a
or
table,
they own like a mansion.
Right, exactly. So I mean, whereas when I started, that order would occur like once a month or once every other month. You know, by the time I had left, we were seeing those B2B orders daily.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So what do you think was it a culture change in the market, or do you think you guys did little tricks to show them the shipping and make them feel comfortable to buy? What was that?
Yeah, I mean, I do think there's generally an overall lift in like just a comfort level, right? Like, I mean, I think people are more comfortable buying online than they've ever been. So there is that. I think we owe like Industry West never did free shipping, or very rarely did free shipping, never did free returns. But I think like the consumer side expectations that have been built by like the Amazons of the world, you know, I think just trickled down to other merchants where people are like, okay, I'm really willing to buy anything anywhere. Like, and I expect like it's going to be okay. Like there's just like, I guess like people are just starting to trust more online. I mean, I think in terms of what we did, like what was good for us. I mean, I think like we generally had a very good track record. We had we put customer service first. Like all our reviews were overwhelmingly excellent. We spent an amazing amount of time and energy in photography, being a primarily e-commerce business with just one showroom in Soho. So obviously a small segment of our customer base could actually visit the showroom. Being that, you know, I think we spent a lot of time on the photography and creative, which was, I think, went a long way to people like really trusting that they were getting a quality product, and just going above and beyond on customer service and being able to refer people to the, like if someone had a question, you know, where can I see this, or can I talk to someone who's bought 100 of these? Like we're always happy to make those connections and really treat every customer uniquely.
You built this community trust almost, where people started to trust you guys, and you're like, hey, they just felt like, hey, I can buy this 20 unit order. Whereas, and so I think that's interesting because B2B companies maybe need to think about, how do I build trust with our customer base or future customer base so they actually trust me to order online?
Sure.
I think a lot of them just haven't figured that out, and the trust is with the sales rep, right? Like still today, most of the B2B orders I feel like are associated with a sales rep.
Yeah. And I think also, I mean, Jordan was super smart in the early days, is like with that bistro chair. I mean, he had these really cool stickers, like embossed stickers made that he put on the back of the chair that said Industry West with the logo. And so like you're sitting in a cafe in Soho and you like this bistro chair and you're sitting on it and it's got the sticker right there. It's branded, it was pretty unique for furniture. So I think that went a long way on the B2B side as well.
It's almost like the Gucci of furniture. You guys figured out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Just like it, yeah.
Just like it. Totally.
Tell us a little bit about what you're seeing now at Bolt. I'm assuming you're seeing a larger, you know, in Industry West, you're seeing Industry West. You're not necessarily getting in all the views of all the different things going on, but at Bolt, you guys have thousands of customers, right? So are you seeing an uptick in B2B customers, or B2C moving into B2B, or B2B moving into B2C? Like what are you kind of seeing, you know, at a broader level now?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah. I mean, I think there's definitely a merging of experience. Like I think you're going to start finding that there are very few products that are going to be like just very like singularly B2B marketed. I think we're finding that, like, again, kind of going back to like what I was saying, is the customer is expecting a a good shopping experience and a good website experience either way. So I mean, I think like we always see the numbers like X number of, it used to be like responsive, right? Like I can't believe how many sites aren't responsive on mobile yet. I can't believe how many sites aren't doing this. And that's like, of course, that's not happening at all on the consumer side. But I mean, there's still some really bad B2B websites out there, right? There's some really bad B2B
We have
experience.
seen them.
Yeah.
They're
So I mean, I
bad.
think more and more, I mean, I think like in terms of like those trends, I think that's really where it's at, right? It's like B2B companies that are investing more in consumer side technology that would be more considered consumer side, whether it's like one-click checkout. Like, and I give an example of like one-click checkout only because like going back to the beginning of our conversation is like, look at BigCommerce and look at the investment BigCommerce is putting into B2B with it's building out there. And then like BigCommerce and Bolt is a BigCommerce partner. Like, so now you have this, you have whoever the B2B client is in BigCommerce with multiple address books, right? Utilizing a BigCommerce website and all being able to check out with one click via Bolt. I mean, so you have like, now you're merging like these, what were once considered like more consumer side technologies with B2B technologies and a B2B customer. And so I think that's like where you're starting to see that intermingle in terms of the e-commerce, the tech stack, and then how marketers work and what's considered an e-commerce SaaS versus what's considered consumer side SaaS. Like, are we considering like Klaviyo on the SMS side as like, are we considering that B2B or B2C technology? Like right now it's both, right?
Exactly. And you know, the way I look at it too is that, you know, I think a lot of people, you know, individual people are both B2B and B2C, depending on what, you know, they have to do during the course of a day. Like I'm a consumer and I have to do things for clients, for my own business, for people that I work with, and for me, right? And so I expect a certain experience, you know, when I'm doing all of this now. And I also, you know, connects to social media as well. We've talked about this with other guests where, you know, B2B thought for a long time they didn't really have to play in the social space, which makes no sense. I mean, we're all out in social, we're all doing our things out in social media. So yeah, you know, you got to be out there too.
Yeah, I mean, I think really you're kind of driving home the point that we're, after 52 episodes, we're kind of realizing it's like B2B and B2C are almost the same in a lot of ways. And I think a better way to think about it is like, how complex is your sales process and how can you make it easier for them to buy? And in some cases, there are B2B sales that are actually simpler than a B2C product, right? Like, there are some very simple B2B products that you can buy, and we should be making that really easy for the B2B buyers to buy from. And even if it's complex, that doesn't mean you shouldn't be able to figure out how to make it online, right?
Well, you know, and maybe I'd like to hear Ian's, you know, view on this too. But one of the things, and again, a lot of this is just what we've been seeing and hearing in recent times, but you know, the whole concept of like to the trade, you know, that used to be around, like,
right.
You know, the special place over here, you know, that just is just getting broken down completely. It really can't exist, I think, much longer. It'll just piss people off, to be very blunt. It's like, well, why can't I? You know, what's stopping me?
Right. Yeah, I mean, and there's any number of industries still like bespoke, whether you're looking for, I mean, I think a lot of the higher AOV products, even on the consumer side, right? Like if you're shopping for a home and you're looking for like an amazing chandelier, amazing kitchen table or something, like if you start to talk like items that are $5,000, $6,000, $10,000, like you still can't buy those online. Like First Dibs to an extent, a little bit, but largely it's still like, okay, call a representative, call a quote. And I think that's just going to start to go away more and more across, you know, higher end items, and then B2B as well.
I think Tesla is a good example of someone that's kind of revolutionized this, right? Like, whoever thought you would buy your car online, but now Tesla's like, hey, put $1,000 down and, you know, we'll get you your car. and all of a sudden you're like customizing your car and buying your car.
Carvana too.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great example.
So if you're going to buy a $30,000, $40,000, $100,000 car online, like, why can't you buy a $5,000 piece of furniture?
I mean, I think while you're going through this conversation, also it's also like the conversational commerce aspect of it. So, I mean, what's let's take the e-commerce trend. I think there's a gray area of what becomes an e-commerce transaction. So let's say instead of a phone call, the B2B shopping experience is over chat on your website. Mm-hmm. And they agreed, yeah, I want these 100 chairs. You put the PDF of the quote into the chat. They say, yeah, that's a great quote. And then, like, for instance, with Bolt, like I could spin up a back office link to a payment modal really quickly for that invoice, and then just send them the link right through the chat, and they pay right there in the chat via Bolt checkout, secure Bolt checkout. Yeah. Right? That happened, right? Exactly. So still, like, that's utilizing a Bolt maybe consumer side e-commerce platform, e-commerce, friendly SaaS. It's happening on the website via chat, via Drift. And then, so exactly, like it's all blending. It's all
and I think that you brought up a really good point, because in B2B, I think they need to start thinking about how are the ways that I'm going to sell and where do I prioritize my time. I mean, I've been thinking a lot about this because, frankly, people might not want to hear this, but I think there's, people bring up e-commerce, and a lot of times when you hear e-commerce, I'm an e-commerce expert, all they're doing is just throwing product on Amazon or on a marketplace. And like putting your stools on Wayfair or Amazon is so different and frankly, generally much easier than building a enterprise Magento 2 website that connects to and processes all these different orders.
Well,
and these are, so like, there's all these different, like, well, is selling on Amazon e-commerce or selling on your website? I mean, in my opinion, those are so different. They almost shouldn't even be considered the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think FBA companies is a totally different animal than an e-commerce company, and not for nothing. Like running a full stack enterprise Magento or Salesforce kind of site is way different than running a Shopify site. Yeah, exactly. So I mean, I think, and there's nothing wrong with either of it, but I mean, I think I don't know. I used to tweet a lot in the past about, like, how I thought the Shopify-ification of e-commerce was getting a little bit out of hand, and because I mean I think it's made it really easy for everyone to spin up a site, but I think it's a little overblown in terms of like what Shopify can do for you in terms of actually getting your product out there, right? Like marketers still need to market. You still need to have some sort of tactic or plan or money to get eyes on your product.
I've been saying this, it's kind of disillusioned and spoiled a lot of people into thinking that they can, pay a developer $5,000 and build like $100 million business on Shopify. It's just like, not, you know what I mean? Like you get to a certain point, like once you're at a certain scale, like doesn't matter what platform you're on, like you're going to need developers, you're going to need integrations, you're going to need complexity. It's just like, I don't see how you could avoid that, right? Like once you're doing a certain amount of volume.
Well, it's also, and this is the non-technical side, but it's also critical for B2B too, is the story. You got to have a narrative, right? I mean, so, we've always talked about that too, to an extent. It's like they're tech, and all of these other things, people doing e-commerce, but if you don't have a story, you're not really going to be attracting people to your B2B product or service as opposed to anything else.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, we actually have some Shopify clients where it's like they're getting to this point where what they need ends up being the only way to do it is basically to like build custom private apps and all these custom things. And then at that point, it's like, well, are we Shopify or are we just like building you custom software?
Well, that's
like,
yeah.
And that's where all the money is going. It's like, we're not spending that much money on Shopify. We're spending money on all the custom shit.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question, a great conversation to have. And I think that's one, like Mac Weldon is a brand that I love.
I did something for them a while back too. I know those guys very well.
Yeah. And some of their experience online, I was wondering like how much of that is plug and play, how much of that is just Shopify apps, and how much that was custom coded. And a fair amount of it, via Twitter conversation, it is custom coded. So I mean, yeah, then what are we really doing? Yeah, it's super interesting.
So where do you see things going? With B2B, do you think that companies are going to have to culturally, and I'm kind of leading you on with this question, but like it seems like we're moving towards a culture of B2B having to start saying, well, now I got to invest in brand and experience. I can't just like have a crappy website and you call me up. Like, I think you have to invest in. Do you think brand? Because a lot of these companies, we haven't even really talked about brand. If you look at a lot of these B2B companies, it's like they haven't updated their logo in like 25 years.
Sure. I mean, like, I don't think, yeah, like, I think it's more, I think it begins with experience. Like, I think in a B2B space, generally, let's take a more, like, I think if you're looking at more traditional B2B sectors, or verticals, and again, not like furniture, which
Industrials. Let's
is
go with
right.
industrial supplies.
Exactly. Like you're looking for widgets and lug nuts. Like, I think like a good experience first and foremost. Like, I don't think they need the narrative. I don't think they need like the history of the company, and they don't need to know, like, for like, it's not like a Tom's thing, right? Like, it's not like every lug nut you buy from us, we're donating a lug nut. Like, it's like, let's just but yeah, I do think like the experience itself, just, yeah, it needs to be clean. Like, I think especially as, like, professionals age out and you have the next generation of it's digitally native, right? Like my kids, my 15-year-old, it's just what's expected. Like, I can't imagine like my 15-year-old hitting the workforce in 6 years and seeing like, some of these horrible, like some horrible B2B site. Like, it would just be
He just
laughable,
won't
right?
buy. He'll
Right,
go somewhere
exactly.
else.
Just won't. Right.
Yeah, but one thing I would bring up too is I was working with a company that in mining, believe it or not. I mean, I get a wide range of folks that I end up talking to, and they specifically were dealing with minerals for vitamins and nutritional supplements. But here's the interesting thing: it wasn't just experience that was important to them working with these particular, like mining businesses. They really wanted to have the narrative. And the reason they wanted to have the narrative is they felt that they had to pass on to their end consumer the story. Well, are these also miners who are doing blood diamonds, right? I mean, they wanted to know everything, right?
Yeah.
They wanted it all. So they wanted that story. So they went only to those businesses, those mining operations that really were open about what they were doing online. And if they weren't going to work with them, right? Unless
yeah, that's, I mean, I think there are definitely outliers. I think that's a great example. Like, yeah, definitely, like, you want to make sure you're working with a morally above board company, and yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
That's definitely a great
they're not
example.
building lug nuts with slave labor, right, overseas.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's weird. Like, and again, I'm an older guy, so I never would have thought of this like 20 years ago, 30, never. Like, it wasn't in the conversation, but now this is the conversation, right? So I think about this stuff when I look at any business, B2B or B2C, I'm like, well, who are they? What are they up to, right? It's fascinating.
I think you brought up a really good point, though. Like, yes, it's really important to have a good, simple user experience. But I think the reason we call this the hard truth about B2B commerce is, let's go with the industrial example just to stay on that for a bit. A lot of those companies have 100,000 SKUs. That building a good user experience for 100,000 SKUs, customers across the United States and other countries, different price levels, crazy ERP stuff, like, that's a lot harder than it sounds. Like, it's easy to just say, make it a good user experience, but the actual like thoughtfulness to do that is, I think, where people underestimate that there's like an art to making a simple B2B site. Mm-hmm. Like, it's simple, but it's not simple, right? Like, the back end is way more complicated than you might think.
Yeah, sure, of course. But then again, it goes like, well, okay, so that makes on-site search like a critical component, right? If you have a site with 1,500 SKUs, 2,500 SKUs, so what are you using? Are you using out of the box, Elasticsearch, or using something that we're using like a Klaviyo or whatever you want to be using for your on-site search. So yeah. So I mean, I think that's it all ties in.
Yeah. So yeah, tell us a little bit more about what you're up to at Bolt. I think everyone online, at least for your Twitter followers, like we've all kind of got to know you from Industry West, but what are you actually, what made you make it jump, right? Like,
yeah. So, I mean, being in Industry West for 6 years, it was a great run. Really respect the team there and the company. I think we built something great. And I think I, left it better than I found it, which is always important. I was really interested in getting into more of, being more on the SaaS side, being part of a startup like Bolt. I think the product is amazing. I do truly think Bolt will win the one-click checkout space. I think the product roadmap is awesome, and I think they're really invested in seeing merchant success through to the end. So my role there is really to evangelize on behalf of the company externally and evangelize on behalf of the merchants internally. So in a lot of our product marketing, I'm chiming in on, does this make sense for the merchant? Is this how the merchant would understand it? What's the best way for us to explain it to the merchant? And then tell a lot of our merchant stories, and then really just advise, just thought leadership across, advising e-commerce, really just like you found me, man, like just being a talking head out there and trying to do my best to evangelize on behalf of e-commerce and on behalf of our merchants, and be a resource. And yeah, so that's we're spinning up some great webinars, doing some podcasting ourselves, doing some great articles and thought leadership via a Think Shop banner that we use over at Bolt that we're expanding and redesigning. And yeah, it's really, really exciting what's going on there.
So
the product roadmap is awesome.
Oh, cool. So where are you with like payment terms for B2B through Bolt or Bitcoin?
Not doing crypto yet. Terms, they are it would have to be through a buy now pay later service.
Sure.
That's currently and looking to onboard more and more of those into Bolt's portal. But yeah, currently not with crypto.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I think we should have a crypto episode. Crypto is a whole weird kind of thing right now.
It's a very weird thing, but I ask because, I have to say, I hear about it all the time still, after all these years,
Yeah. I mean, I've got my wallet, my crypto that I've used on absolutely nothing. But yeah, you got to be aware of it if nothing else.
Yeah. I get in arguments with my friends because some of them are like really gung ho about it. I'm like, the problem is like, what are you doing with it? Like, tell me what. I'm gonna get excited once you're actually using it. Like,
it's interesting time, crypto and NFTs and fractional, and I've been a little bit more into like fractional ownership piece of like sports collectibles and stuff.
Sure.
More so than on the NFT side. In terms of
that's a use case though, right? Like to me, that's like great. Fractional, you couldn't do that before. That's a use case. But like payments have been around. Both, PayPal has been around for 20 years.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. It's all certainly very interesting. Yeah, for sure.
Well, yeah, really appreciate your time. Do you have any, advice for anyone, entering the B2B commerce space? Because I think for a lot of people, they might say like, well, all I did was social media, or I did outbound. Like I can't do what Ian did. Like, what advice would you give them, from going from, maybe traditional marketing into
that's a great. Yeah, I mean, I think really, I've always said, I've been blessed to every position I've been at. I've just absorbed everything I could to take it to the next role. And I think that's really, I've just tried to be a sponge. I've tried to learn. I've tried to empathize and just be patient as much as I could. I've always said some of the best, I think in terms of like, I think the journalism background goes a long way. I also think like some of your best marketers and some of your best leaders are going to be the ones that are your best quality control and quality assurance people now. And I feel like that's where I always fit in. Like when I was at a junior level anywhere was like, okay, I don't know how this works, but I know it's not working right. Right, like I would
attention to
see,
detail,
like,
right? So just
right,
that, like,
exactly.
yeah.
Like when I was just doing social media, like I understood web, and we would like launch a website at the university I was at, and I was like, whoa, the meta title is not updated. Like I know like there should be a meta title, right? There should be a meta description. Like what are we doing here? And so like that attention to detail, that QC, like I think if you're able to find people, like if you're able to just continue to pick up those skills and come on and just learn as much about everything as you can, and just be curious. I mean, that's a big pillar of Bolt's kind of conscious culture is be curious. And yeah, I think that's critical.
No, I love that. That's actually really unique. I think that's an interesting perspective. Like, hey, if you're willing to kind of get in the weeds and show that, hey, this thing's not working, I don't necessarily understand right now, but then you might say over time, learn why it's not working.
Sure.
So by basically, having the attention to detail, figuring out the problems and things that are broken.
Yeah,
I mean, I learn over time, right?
Yeah. I ultimately, when I was at Savannah College of Art and Design, I led an internal development team of 4 back-end developer, Drupal devs, 3 or 4 front-end devs, and a bunch of content people. And like, could I plan a sprint? No. Could I, do I know how, like, I'm not a sprint master or by any means, but like, do I know generally the concept now of like, going into like this position or any other position, do I know like, yeah, okay, I know like dev teams should generally work on 2-week sprints, and how to like that they should be planning for that. And like, this is how they need to, utilize Asana or whatever. Like those are all things I picked up, like just learning and working with those people and working with devs and leading devs and being around good people and smart people. So yeah, I mean, I think that's critical, just to take all that with you.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much. I think we'll have to have you back on when you've had more time at Bolt.
Word. Yeah.
I think so. We'll catch you along the journey, so we can.
All right. Yeah, that's great. Well, thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure.
All right.